Alright, hello people. This is part three of the. Why is that there? I had that there for a reason. I did, yeah. This is part three of. No, actually, I don't need that yet there. What am I doing? This is part three of the render queue for, say, like a three power setup, or I guess just the fundamentals of render queue. In the last episode, I sort of talked through where I was adding all the render queue. In this episode here, what I'm going to talk about is how to actually time it out. So for this cannon here, we've got three separate pieces of render queue. You can see these three tripwire hooks here all activate different things. I'm going to try and wire this as nicely as possible, but I know it's not going to come out particularly well. That's all right though. So let's recap what we're doing. So our powers, so we've got three powers, and then we've got our hammer as well. So all three powers get shot into here. Now we need a way to separate all three powers, and in this case here, we're going to use render queue. So um, as we follow the powers through in the sequence of events that they're going to take. So first power gets shot up into this lantern, goes forwards, hits that fence gate, goes into the barrel. Second power shot up into the lantern, goes forwards, hits that fence gate, goes into the barrel. Third power, not the third power, the hammer comes through here, gets shot up, then that fence gate opens, gets shot through into that comp there, and then into the hammer booster. Now to stop our third power, which is going to be our push power from going through with all of that, what we will do is flip down that trapdoor there so it triangles prematurely and goes into the barrel. Then finally, after the fourth power goes, that there goes, which is our shots, sort of like our shot queue. So to separate the shots so we don't have the like whatever's left getting shot out into the barrel as well, like the rest of the hammers, everything like that. So first thing that I like to time here is the shot queue. So that is what separates the actual shots, and that is going to be falling into that tripwire hook there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and wire everything from the top here. So we are going to have our two powers. So that's power one, power two. That's our hammer, and that's power 3. Now, because this is running at 0.8, I'm going to basically, it's it's essentially like a constant dispensing of TNT every two redstone ticks. So like two ticks after this one gets powered, it cycles back and powers that one again. So what that means is we are going to need something to separate. Stop pinging me, I swear to God. We're going to need something to separate power 3 here from power 1. Now, the easiest way that we can do that is just have some TNT timed such that it gets rendered after power 3 and before power 1, which will basically mean offsetting it by, say, a redstone tick or something. And that TNT there needs to fall through this tripwire hook as that booster goes off. So what I might do with this one here, to try and keep everything as neat as possible, I think I'm going to wire it off this side here, and I'm just going to run it around, say, to here. So this one needs to go off at, so what's that? So that's our reference point, or we'll use this as the reference point because that's what we're powering that off. Let's go up at 1, so power 1 is going off at, plop chat, power 1 is going to be going off, that note block gets powered, and then in turn that powers that redstone line there, which powers that fence gate, and then all that gets powered. So power 2 is at 2, or power 1 is at 2, power 2 is at 4, hammer is at 6, third power is at 8. And then we get that repeat 2 redstone ticks after that, so then it's going to turn into 10, 10, 12, 14, 16. Now, what we need to do first is, because we're splitting up shots, we need to basically put a little split in the middle there. I'm just typing this down the text box below, just because I don't want to write it on sides. But that there, that's where we need to time it. So between 8 and 10, easiest thing that we can do here is just time it at 9. It's a whole redstone tick. We don't need a game tick anything, nothing like that. So I'm going to have a piece of TNT that fires at 9. So pretty easily, just going to go from here, and we're just going to go I'm gonna do it in 2 redstone tick increments here. I'm pretty sure I can do 3 with 0.8, but I'm just gonna do 2 to be safe. And then we're gonna have a dispenser on the end there. Don't really care what this dispenser's doing. I'm just gonna use a node tick counter just to make sure that it is going off when I want it to go off, and then I can carry on from there. So I've just node ticked that booster as a reference point, the powers, and then I'm going to node tick that as well. I'm just gonna fire a single shot just to get us started. So should see 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, and you can see that's going off 1 redstone tick after there. So we know this is correctly timed. Next thing we need to do, we know it's timed right, we need to drop it in the right spot. So in this case here, we don't want to use split shots, that's to, oh no, we do want to use split shots. Okay, so it's right here. So we need to drop a TNT through this piece of string right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back to the top, and now I know that this is where I want to drop it. So does that work? No, that doesn't work. That works there, and I'm just going to add that 2 redstone tick thing back to the end there. So now we've got this going off at the right timing, and we've got it getting dropped in the right spot. So you should see, boom. Now, this is, some would call it the fun part. I wouldn't. This is where it gets a bit annoying. So now we basically need to make that TNT fall through the same game tick that that booster goes off. So my preferred way of doing it is getting a dispenser, and I will attach a dispenser to the render queue that I'm using, and I will use a node tick counter. So I've got my reference point, which is just going to be that back booster, and then the booster goes off, which is going to be that one there, and we should see approximately 40 redstone ticks between 2 and 3. So I'm going to fire that. 7. That did not work at all. Why didn't that work? Is it not TNT filled? I might be blind. 7. Okay, so I think what's actually going on there is the TNT is falling too quickly. It's actually phasing through the tripwire, which is actually like the first time I've had that issue. But for now, I'm just going to add some powdered snow. So what powdered snow does is it blocks sand, but more importantly, it slows TNT down. So you don't need to have essentially a massive pillar into the sky to drop the TNT through. We can time it more finely with a bit of powdered snow. So my preferred setup is to have 1 powdered snow on the side here and then 1 underneath. And that will greatly slow it down. And when we fire again, should see 0, 7, 55.5. So we're about, what's that, 48 redstone ticks off, or 8 redstone ticks off. So in this case here, since it's going off too late, that means we need to drop the render queue down. You can see it visually there as well. But what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to drop this down by approximately, it's about 1 block per game tick. So I need to move this about 16 blocks down. So I'm going to move it 16 down. And what I'm going to do is, ooh, it's a bit dodgy. I'm pretty sure this sticky piston here is doing all 12 blocks, which it is. So what I might do is this one shouldn't be doing 12. No, no way in hell. So what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to put an observer there. I'm not sure if that's going to bud power. In fact, it might. So what I'll do is piston, and then I'll put an observer here. I still don't like that, to be honest. Okay. So at this point here, clean wiring is just absolutely out the window. But anyway, we're going to fire that again. In this case here, though, I'm just going to reset the node ticks just to make sure that's still on the correct timings. So I'll time that, and then that. So we should see all 3 powers go off, and then 1 redstone tick after that last power goes off. That's when that 1 ref goes off, which it does. So we're still on the same timings. That actually looks pretty close, to be honest. Anyway, I'm just going to go back to using this one as the reference point. This booster here, and then this dispenser here. TNT fill, and we'll fire again. So, now that TNT is timed correctly, now it's just a matter of splitting it correctly. You see 748. So, that is going off at 41 redstone ticks. So I just need to move it down a little bit more. In this case here, I'm going to do it pretty badly. I'm just going to move it down one like that. And now that we know we're getting very, very close to the timings, what we're going to start doing is firing this cannon in like 2-shot increments. So what I mean by that is basically I'm going to fire 2 shots out of this cannon just to see if it splits it correctly. And you will know pretty easily when it does split it correctly. So what I'm going to do is I'm pretty sure I can feed this cannon with a 2 redstone tick pulse. So I'm going to have something to power it there, which in this case I'll use an observer. And then I'll just run that redstone line there through a repeater there, and then I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4. And that should be a 8 redstone tick separation between our powers, which is what we want. So we just fired 2 shots there. And you can see in this case here, I think that trapdoor was closing early. And the reason I say that is because I didn't see anything reach the barrel. If the trapdoor closes late, then everything will reach the barrel. If it closes early, nothing will reach the barrel. When it's on time, you will see half and half. So I'll move one up, TNT fill, and all I'm going to do now is I'm just going to keep firing this in these increments until we get it right. So nothing hit the barrel there, so that means that it's still too early. TNT fill, and we're going to fire again. You can see there, what's happened is we have that discrete splitting of the powers now. You can see that's basically perfectly timed. So if I fire that again, you'll see exactly what happens. So first shot goes through, and you can see the second shot actually clips into that trapdoor. It's a little bit hard to see, but that second shot does clip into that trapdoor. And then it basically gets locked there until the next shot goes through, and then it gets shot into the barrel. So I'll fire it one more time, just so we can have another look. So we'll go 1, and then 2. Perfect. So we know that render queue there is now working properly. Next render queue that we're going to tackle is going to be this fence gate here. So that fence gate there is wired off that. So that fence gate there needs to go off after the second power, but before the hammer. So what we're trying to do with that fence gate there is basically have it open after the powers reach the barrel, in which case it's going to let the hammer and everything through here into the booster. And then after it does that, we of course get that trapdoor, but we're not going to worry about that for now. We're just going to get the hammer getting split off through the side here. And in this case here, now that I know that the shot queue is timed correctly, I'm just going to stop double pulsing it, and we're just going to focus on splitting apart our hammer and everything. So next challenge now is to get some render queue timed between power 2 and the hammer. So goal here is going to be basically to have it roughly in the same spot as this one here. That's the shot queue. So the shot queue is going off, say about here. It's going off like 1 redstone tick after that. So if we wind it back 2 redstone ticks, then it's going off between the hammer and power 3, which is actually what we want the back render queue on. But if we wind it back 2 shots again, it's going to be between the second power and the hammer. So we're going to need a 4 redstone tick separation between this this render queue here and the render queue that we're using to split the hammers. So if we go back to the text message where we were just basically saying 0 to 4, 6 is our timing. I was using like 2, 4, 6, 8, but anyway, what we need to do is we have a split in there, a 1 redstone tick. So we're splitting it at 7. Now we need to split it at 3 as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm sort of just going to wire it pretty poorly, to be honest. I'm just going to wire it straight off here, and I'm just going to wrap it around. So again, we're just going to follow the same pattern as this one here, which is we need to work out where it needs to drop into the tripwire, which in this case it's here, the fence gate. You can see that fence gate closes and opens when I stand in it. So I'm going to put myself here, and then I'm going to go up, and it should be more or less at the same height as this one. Now it's not going to be identical, and that's because it's rendered before that one rev there. It's going to start falling earlier, which means it's going to block it, or actually open it up earlier. So in this case here, when that fence gate opens up earlier, it's going to let absolutely everything through here. So the way that we're going to troubleshoot this one and time this one out correctly is we are going to fire it first, and you should see everything comes through the fence gate, and then we will drop it down by block each time, and then when half goes through the fence gate into this spot here, and the other half goes into the barrel, we know we are then splitting out our hammer correctly. So I'll fire it again. Should see there's our first piece of render queue. See it opens, and you can see how it shoots into here. And like basically there's none in the barrel, everything is getting shot there. That means we know that the render queue is going off early. So what I'll do is I'll just go move one down, and simply enough, we are going to fire it again. Just going to watch for the same thing. If all the TNT ends up there, that means it's too early. Yep, all of it does. And so we drop it down again. So I'm expecting to drop this down by about 8 blocks. Again, I'm not really too fussed how I wire this one. You can always rewire it when you're finished. But yeah. After this one here, I'm just going to drop it down by 4 blocks because, again, it's roughly 1 game tick per block. You can see everything goes down there again. So I'm just going to go move 4 down, and then I'm just going to try and wire that. It's going to be gross, but it'll be fine just for the purposes of this educational video. This is not how I do it in the actual Canon. You could have a look at my 0.6 video for how I would actually do it. But in this case here, this is fine. So let's watch, let's see what happens. So you can see what happened there is everything got shot into the barrel, which means that fence gate is... Wait, am I an idiot? I might have actually just gone full moron. We'll see. Yep. So I've gotten this completely mixed up. This actually needs to go, because it's going off earlier, it needs to fall at the same time. It actually needs to go like 10 blocks above. So I'm just going to move it 10 up. I'm just going to rewire it into there. Yeah, if everything's going into that spot there, we know then the fence gate is opening too early. So that's my bad. Occasionally it does happen with render queue because it's not an easy concept to know. A lot of people still really struggle with this. I mean, I still struggle occasionally with it as well, as you just saw. But anyway, so you can see everything goes into the into this spot again. We didn't see anything enter the barrel, I don't think. So I'm just going to fire it again. We're just going to watch it. If nothing enters into the barrel, then we know it's still time too early. Yep, which it does. Okay, cool. So again, we're just going to go back down here, move this up by another block, on up, and we're going to fire it again. I will just keep doing this until it works. So again, everything entered there, so it's a bit too early. But you can see now that it's looking like the timings are looking closer and closer. Again, everything entered into there. We should be getting very, very close now. I'm not sure what the vertical separation is between those 2 bits of render queue, but we should be just about ready. Okay, so we saw some reach into that barrel there. I'm not sure if everything reached into the barrel, or half did. Try that again. I've just turned on explosion boxes, so we'll see. So I think everything entered the barrel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop it down by 1 again. Move 1 down. and a TNT fill, and we'll fire again. I think we had a split there. I don't use explosion boxes, so it's a little bit hard sometimes. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to try and make it a little bit more discreet. Alternatively, you can also use entity tracking as well. But we'll see if we get half and half. Yeah, yeah. So you can see some TNT ended up here, some TNT ended up here. So we know that the render queue is now working. Perfect. So our final render queue is this one around the side here. I'm probably just going to wire it off here. And the reason for that is we want this to be going off. So we've got our render queue that goes off between power 2 and hammer. We know that's splitting correctly. And we also have our render queue that's going off after power 3. So we need to insert the render queue in the middle that keeps power 3 into the barrel. So we need some render queue in there. So we've got some time to, if we say this is 2, 4, 6, 8, we have our render queue timed at 9, which splits the shots. We have our render queue timed at 5, which splits the hammer. Now we're going to need some render queue timed at 7 to resplit our third power back into the barrel. So exactly the same thing again. Just going to go over the top of that render queue there. Now this one is going to be timed a little bit later, which means it's going to be a little bit lower down. So 2 redstone ticks on that for the time being. And this one's going to be a little bit harder to see how it works. In this case here, what I think I'm going to do is I'm actually going to, it's a little bit awkward. I think the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to disable the hammer, and I'm going to see if the render queue or if the third power goes through the fence gate again. So how I'm going to do that is I'm just going to put a piece of rail in here. That'll pulse, that's fine. And that pulses again. And basically what that's going to do now is it's not going to power the hammer at all. It's just going to completely skip the hammer. And that means we should only get a little bit of TNT ending up in this spot here. In this case, I'm going to use the entity tracking to follow where that's going. I'm going to fire it again. So you can see our third explosion ends up there. CHI1. We follow that. Should see that it does end up 9, 10. It ends up in this little nook here. So it's going through the fence gate. We don't want it going through the fence gate. And of course we wired up, or we added this trapdoor to stop it from going through the fence gate and redirect it back into the barrel. And that trapdoor is wired up here, and hence that's where our render queue goes. Now this goes off 2 redstone ticks after the hammer render queue. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wire this in. I know this is going to be approximate. We can work out whether it's too late or too soon by what that power does. So if it ends up in there, it's going to be too late. Yeah, it'll be too late. So what I'm going to do now is, if it's too late, I need to shift it down to make it go earlier. So I'll go move 1 down, TNT fill, and we're just going to fire it again. And it'll be the second that we see 3 explosions back in the barrel, we know it's then working. Still see that discrete explosion on the side there. So I'm going to move it down by 1 again. Move 1 down, TNT fill, and I'm going to fire it again. Boom. Let's have a look. Now you can see we got 3 explosions in the barrel there. That's pretty much what I expect with that setup there, to be honest. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn the hammer back on. So I'm just going to replace that there, CE, TNT fill, and we're going to fire it again. So what we should see is explosion, 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 if it's all timed out correctly. I think that was right, and we can also entity track the last thing to go off, which is our third power. Okay, so we see our third power entering our barrel, and we should see our hammer. I'm just gonna chuck this out here, we should see our hammer getting split off to the side. So we'll wire that up again, and we'll have a look. I'm just going to extend the arrow blocks as well, actually. Okay, and I'm going to, that's all clear. Okay, so we should see explosion, 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 explosion. Yep, which I think we do. And now I'm going to try autoing 2 shots as well, just to make sure that the power splitting is working. Yep. So you can see we've got a bunch of explosions in the barrel, bunch of 2 explosions out here. So I'm very, very confident that this splitting setup here is working properly. From this point here, we are getting power 1, power 2 in the barrel, power 3 also in the barrel, and our hammer's getting split off correctly. So what you would do here from this point onwards for a cannon like this is you would add in the OSRB comp here. You would add some more render queue here. And basically this render queue is for splitting up the boosters. I will probably add this in the next video for this cannon here, just to sort of show you how to wire that up. It's basically the exact same as the shot queue here, but in this case here, we have everything successfully wired up and rendering properly for this part of the cannon. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed, hopefully you learned something new, and I will catch you later.